I found tampons in my husband's car, and part of me wished it was an affair. It would have spared my kids this nightmare. I'm a 29-year-old woman, married to my 30-year-old husband for 4 years, together for 7. I never questioned his devotion or thought he was dissatisfied in our marriage. He often joked we were still in the honeymoon phase, even after almost 5 years and 2 children. I'd have nodded in agreement until a shocking discovery in his car last month shattered my confidence. While buckling our daughter into her car seat, I noticed something tucked into the seat's crevice. Thinking it was a lost toy or snack wrapper, I reached for it. My fingers closed around a familiar shape. A tampon. Confusion washed over me as I pulled it out, its bright wrapper stark against the car's upholstery. This wouldn't have raised an eyebrow, except I've had an IUD for a year, which halted my periods. Plus, the brand wasn't one I'd ever bought. The unfamiliar wrapper churned my stomach. That night, I confronted my husband, holding the tampon like evidence in a mystery I needed to solve. He looked genuinely baffled at first, staring at the item in my hand with puzzlement. "Why are you holding that up?" he asked, brows furrowing. I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my tone steady. "I found it in your car, stuffed in the seat. It's not mine. I haven't used tampons in over a year." His face remained blank for a moment before a spark of recognition flashed. He brushed it off, saying it probably belonged to his co-worker, Fiona. His initial confusion melted into casual indifference as he dismissed my unease with a careless comment. "Likely Fiona's," he said, eyes glued to his phone. "Must have slipped out during lunch the other day." I stared, waiting for him to acknowledge my distress. But he gave nothing. No apology, no comfort. Just detachment. His cold dismissal stung, making me question everything I believed about our relationship. My husband often gives colleagues rides to lunch, and we're close with Fiona and her partner. The idea of him carpooling with them never sparked concern. They were friends after all, and shared rides were normal. We often hung out as couples, hosting cookouts or movie nights at each other's places. Fiona and I bonded over shared challenges, like balancing work and parenting. Our kids played while we traded tales of workplace drama or personal struggles. It seemed plausible a tampon could have fallen from Fiona's purse during a ride, a simple mistake. I told myself it was nothing major. Maybe it slipped out while she grabbed her keys or wallet. Just an innocent oversight, right? I pushed the troubling find aside, determined not to let a small incident ignite unnecessary drama. Our connection with Fiona and her husband was solid, built on years of trust. There was no reason to suspect anything. I buried my doubts until a dinner with them 2 weeks later. I desperately wanted to trust my husband. But the way the tampon was wedged in the seat and his carefree attitude gnawed at me. Was he pretending not to know? I couldn't tell. In a moment I now feel unhinged for, I faked an emergency during our outing with Fiona and asked if she had a tampon. She handed me one nearly identical to the one from the car, and relief flooded me. It was likely the same brand, pointing to a harmless explanation for the car tampon. I thought I'd seen the last of stray hygiene products until I found another tampon this morning in my sock drawer. The thought of my husband cheating made me ill, but the idea that someone else might be leaving tampons for me to find was even worse. If it was Fiona, why would she risk exposing herself by giving me one? In any other scenario, I'd have talked to my husband. But I felt too sick and humiliated to confront him. Dwelling on the tampon's origins had been my private agony for weeks. But here's an update. After sharing this here, I confided in my sister about everything. The car tampon, the sock drawer discovery, my husband's clueless act, Fiona's tampon, and my deepest fears. We compared the tampons, except the discarded car one, and they matched, differing only in absorbency. I hadn't left them where my husband or daughters could have moved them. My daughters didn't recognize tampons or know where they came from. My sister was convinced Fiona was either involved with my husband, taunting me, or both. Confronting either felt risky, so she suggested inviting Fiona and her husband to our Labor Day barbecue. They had other plans, so that didn't happen. My sister and I agreed cameras were premature without more evidence, so we waited, watching for signs. I kept an eye on my husband's behavior. Nothing seemed amiss. I checked our home for stray items. Nothing appeared. I even asked the girls about new friends, as my sister's husband suggested. He believed the tampons were harmless, noting that any secrecy in our home would be hard to hide from me and the kids, since my husband handled most daycare drop-offs and activities. This reassured me until my 2-year-old daughter fell sick last week. I wanted to stay home with her, but my husband insisted I go to work while he took time off. I agreed, and my sister and her husband saw it as a good sign of his dedication, easing our tampon concerns. By day 3 or 4, I was just thankful to see my daughter recovering and my husband stepping up. But that week, I came home to something strange. The toddler I'd left in familiar pajamas was now in a onesie I didn't recognize, with a small hair clip. I may not have perfect memory, but I know my kids' daily outfits, and I'd stopped using full-length snap onesies before our second child. They're impractical for diaper changes. It wasn't something I'd pick, and my husband knew it. He doesn't shop for or dress the girls, so I was shocked and alarmed that someone might have been near our sick child without my knowledge. Without hesitation, I asked my husband if anyone had visited. He looked confused, like before, and asked why I'd think that. It was just him and the kids all day. I pressed again, asking if anyone had even stopped by briefly. He denied it, telling me to calm down. I might have erupted with accusations, but our older daughter was nearby and sensed the tension. In a calmer tone, I asked a third time if anyone had been around our kids. He swore it was just him, denying buying clothes or doing hair. With our daughter present and my emotions surging, I let it go. I couldn't make sense of it then, and it's barely clearer now after chasing theories that don't hold up. After nearly losing it over a onesie and hair clip, I realized my suspicions weren't providing answers. I'd been so consumed by fear and distress that I was neglecting sleep, meals, and my kids' care. And still, no answers. So I ordered hidden cameras, shipped to my sisters, with my brother-in-law offering to install them at my place. But before they arrived, I got my answer last week. The day began like any typical weekday in our chaotic routine. My husband and I rushed to get our daughters ready for school, grabbing breakfast amid the frenzy. There was a shared rhythm, a sense of teamwork despite the chaos. After dropping the girls at school, we headed to our jobs, looking forward to family time. But an uneasy feeling lingered, growing sharper when my phone pinged at work. A ring notification, motion at the front door. I opened the clip, expecting a delivery or neighbor. What I saw stopped me cold. On my doorstep was a young woman holding my daughter's hand, entering our house with my husband and other daughter following. My heart pounded as I tried to process it. The girls should have been at daycare, my husband at work. This woman, I thought, was living 2 states away under a court order, yet here she was, in our home, with my family. Panic surged as I searched for an explanation. Was this a mistake? A mix-up? Or something worse? My stomach churned as I realized the truth might be more horrific than I'd feared. I stared at the screen, pulse racing as the unthinkable unfolded. The ring footage showed a nightmare. A woman I hadn't seen in years, guiding my youngest into our home with my husband and older daughter behind. Shock rendered me speechless. The girls were supposed to be at daycare, my husband at work. Yet here they were with a woman I never expected to see again, my sister-in-law. Disbelief gripped me, a fleeting hope for a harmless explanation. But as reality sank in, fury roared through me, threatening to consume everything. With trembling hands, I called my husband, desperate for answers. No response. I texted, demanding to know why this woman was in our house. He likely realized his mistake using the front door, triggering the Ring camera, and was stalling. After 5 or 6 calls, he answered. The woman was his sister. As I later learned, she was likely behind the tampons, onesie, and hair clip. She's a registered individual with a history of abuse and addiction who spent years silencing a family member she'd harmed. I hadn't seen her in ages, and from my husband's rare mentions, I assumed she was out of our lives for good. But there she was, with our kids. It wasn't just her return that broke me. It was what her presence meant. My sister-in-law, fresh from rehab, was the last person I expected sneaking into our lives, especially like this. The weight of it crushed me. This wasn't about a stray tampon or a simple mistake. It was betrayal on a profound level. I was livid. It wasn't an affair, yet somehow more violating knowing who she was and why this happened. Apparently, my sister-in-law wanted to make amends with those she'd hurt, including my husband. The irony of her deceptive reconciliation wasn't lost on me. My husband hid it, fearing I'd keep her from our kids. They'd been meeting secretly, often at our house while I worked, entering through the garage to avoid the Ring camera. The calculated deception made my skin crawl. She stayed over during a weekend I was away for work, sleeping in our bed. The thought of her in our space felt like a violation. She watched our girls one night when my husband claimed they were with his parents. His seamless lies and the ease of his secrecy made me question everything about him. She bought the girls clothes, dressing my youngest in the onesie and hair clip he swore I'd chosen. That image now haunted me, a reminder of the betrayal unfolding under my nose. When I sought reassurance, he dismissed me, claiming I was imagining things, overreacting to coincidences. He insisted the tampons, onesie, and clip were all in my head. For weeks, he watched me spiral, shrugging off each disturbing find as if it were trivial, calling me irrational. He even suggested I had postpartum depression 2 years after our youngest, knowing I'd shared my fear of PPD years ago, dreading its impact on our kids. As weeks turned to months, my patience eroded, replaced by a seething anger. How could he dismiss my fears so coldly, gaslighting me into doubting myself? How could he stand by as our family crumbled? He claimed I was sleep-deprived, missing the girls, needing to reassess my mental health. I trusted him because he was my husband, and no other explanation fit. Now, after a month of this torment, I'm left with this devastating reality and immense rage. My husband's explanations fell apart. Confronted, he stumbled, offering weak excuses that unraveled. He mumbled about protecting me from stress, saying his sister just wanted to make amends, but his words were incoherent. Each excuse was flimsier than the last, a frantic cover-up. His evasiveness confirmed my fears. The man I'd built a life with was now a stranger, cloaked in lies. I saw panic in his eyes, the realization he'd been caught with no escape. His silence on key details screamed louder than words, exposing his deceit. I knew I couldn't stay with someone who'd so deeply betrayed me and risked our children's safety. The thought of my daughters exposed to such toxic secrecy was unbearable. I prioritized their well-being, making the hardest choice of my life. With a heavy heart, I ended it. His shock and desperation were almost pitiful, but they couldn't undo the damage. I walked away, resolved to shield my kids from further harm. I filed for divorce, a decision both crushing and empowering. Acknowledging our 7-year journey's bitter end was devastating, but reclaiming my life and my children's safety was liberating. The divorce was grueling, each step a new fight in an endless struggle. Countless court dates drained me, forcing me to relive the betrayal repeatedly. My husband contested everything, dodging blame and posing as the victim. His resistance made the process even more exhausting. In court, I recounted finding the tampons, the secret meetings with my sister-in-law, and his lies. I presented the ring footage of her entering our home with my kids and included statements from my sister and brother-in-law to support my case. But the court needed more than assumptions about my sister-in-law's past. They demanded solid evidence of her behavior, which was hard to secure. Despite obstacles, I stayed focused on the core issue, my husband's deception and broken trust, which were indisputable. The court acknowledged the situation's complexity and its emotional toll. After months of legal battles, I won. I gained primary custody of our daughters, with my husband granted supervised visitation. The judge prioritized a stable environment for the kids, given the deceit and potential risks. Reflecting on this, I've learned critical lessons I hope others heed. Trust is a relationship's foundation. Once broken, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Open communication is essential. Address issues directly, don't let them fester. Above all, never settle for less than you deserve. My children and I deserve a life free from lies and betrayal, and I'm committed to building that future. What's your take on this story? Share your thoughts below. Thank you for reading. If you haven't subscribed, please do, and tap the notification bell for more compelling real-life stories. If this story hit home, please like, share, and follow for more real-life drama. Your support keeps these stories coming. Thanks for reading, and catch you in the next one.